Hey guys, welcome back to FM8tutorials.com. If you're not already, make sure you get yourself subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ADSR tuts. This is the fourth and final part of the Heavy Electro feature we've been doing using FM8, and in this tutorial I'm just going to show you how to kind of finish off the loop really. The previous tutorials we looked at producing the bass sounds and the lead sounds and the kind of pitchy stabs. I've bounced all those sounds out to audio now, and we're just going to look at some kind of final production stuff, mainly on this bass sound, and then kind of bussing these sounds together, compressing them, and also creating this sub. So for starters, with these two bass sounds that we had here, initially these were providing kind of real low end energy. I hadn't EQ'd them at all, but what I've done now is I've applied this kind of high pass filter or low end roll off, really 100 Hz, quite a steep filter slope, 48 dB, and that's just taking anything off down this. That's just going to give us some room for this kick drum here, where there's a lot of energy going on underneath 60 Hz, and also this sub that we're going to put in as well. So just did a little low end roll off on that bass sound, and the same with this kind of warbly bass. Same thing here really, just a low end roll, so we haven't got too much kind of subby frequencies building up, you know, below 100 Hz. So now we've made space for the sub with these two bass sounds. So apply this sub in, and what I did was just copied the MIDI notes from this riff, just copied the MIDI notes over to an empty instrument channel and created an FM8 in here, and just classic sort of sub really, just used the sine wave, took the ratio down to 0.25, so when they hit C3 note the energy's right down there around 60 Hz. Key synced it, so we've got a nice consistent sound. I mean, everything else just stayed the same really, just on the master page made sure the sound was monophonic, and then on the envelope page give it a little bit of release so we're not getting any click on that tail of the sub, so got a nice smooth release on there. And then we set up this sidechain compressor. We've got this sidechain trigger down here, and we set up this sidechain compressor on the bass sound, a lot of the leads as well, and just copied those settings over on the sub. So although the riff that I copied over, the MIDI riff, I've muted out the sub notes that are going to clash with the kick drum that fall on the downbeat of every bar, or the downbeat basically. So I've muted all these out, but just to make sure, if you notice some of these MIDI notes end, they'll clash with the kick drum because they're quite sustained notes. So just to make sure there's not any too much clashing in that low end kind of region, sidechain compressor on the sub, and make sure if we solo the sidechain trigger, the drums and the sub, and we're getting that sub in between the kick drums really, just providing that kind of real low frequency element to the track. And then we bring the bass sounds back in. We've got a nice balance there. So the only things I did really with the production of these bass sounds with this stabby here, obviously we've got the EQ, and I put on this Pro C as well to apply a bit of compression to the bass. What I've set up here, style opto. We've got a soft knee, so it's not too kind of pumpy on the bass sound. Maybe just solo this, and ratio is kind of just below 4.1, threshold minus 17 dB, and I just pulled it down basically till I was getting like, you know, between 5 and 6 dB of gain reduction. Medium to fast attack. I didn't want it too fast in the attack. It's quite a dense bass sound, so if you start using too fast attack and release settings, you'll get some kind of distortion with the compressor. So medium to fast attack, kind of hard, middle kind of release, medium release. just so the kind of compressor's recovering in between notes really, and then just tweak the output. So put the output down a little bit. And it was just kind of firming up the bass really, just sort of bringing it to the front a little bit more, just giving it a kind of touch more aggression, I guess. Another thing I noticed with this kind of bass line, load up this multimeter and mute that direction mixer, we're getting quite a lot of stereo action going on in there, which is a bass sound, although it's not kind of like the sub, it's not going to be providing the sub energy, it's still bass sound. We don't want so much width in the sound really, so I thought, you know, you could either kind of monoize the signal completely, but I thought don't necessarily need to do that. I can use this direction mixer in Logic, and I've taken a spread right down, so as you pull the spread and watch the stereo field of this bass sound, spread down to 0.3, we've thinned it out, so we're still getting a slight amount of stereo in that bass, but we've just tamed that width a little bit, so there's much more focus on the middle of the sound really. I mean, obviously you can use some kind of isotope tools where you've got multi-band stereo imaging, so you could keep everything below a certain frequency completely mono, and then you could keep the middles and the highs of a sound, you know, quite wide and stuff. But I think for the purpose of this bass sound, just a simple direction mixer was going to do the job really. So that was the bass sound sorted. Obviously we've got quite a lot of processing going on a lot of these sounds already, so this kind of warping bass has got the FabFilter Saturn and Pro Q already, which is just kind of distorting and compressing the sound really, that Saturn. And all these other kind of synths have got various different FabFilter settings really. That one, these pitch stabs have actually created these sounds in FM8. We bounced them with the FabFilter Saturn distortion on. So with that kind of loop set up, I thought I wanted the sounds to kind of gel together a little bit more, so we could bus them to one bus channel and just apply some compression on there, which is what I've done here. We set the output of these synth sounds to bus 1, and then we can do with all these different synth sounds on one channel. So the only thing I wanted to do here was to compress the sounds together to just gel them a little bit more. I've used FabFilter Pro C once again, so solo these kind of synths. So we've got all these synths going on here, and quite subtle compression really, kept a soft knee, threshold minus 18 dB, ratios kind of 3:1 or just below, styles clean, so quite transparent compression, not too extreme kind of attack and release, kept it quite soft. You know, we're looking at a couple of dBs of compression really, you know, depending on what sound's happening. It's between about 3 and 4 dB of gain reduction. But the other thing I looked at with this was, if you hit on the expert button in FabFilter Pro C, we can use this sidechain filtering. So just bypass this a second. If we look at the output, we're getting a lot more energy around kind of 125, 200 Hertz. And some peaks and stuff. So what I've done with this sidechain filtering is, so we're not pumping on the low end too much, can kind of roll this bottom end off. You can even audition it in here actually to, and this frequency range, what is remaining, what we can hear in this audition, that's what we're going to be applying compression to. You know, this sidechain filtering, we're bypassing this low end. The compressor's not going to respond to anything below here, so we can reduce that pumping effect on the compressor by setting this sidechain filter. So we're just going to be compressing, I guess, the kind of lower mids, the mids and the tops. So also take this sidechain off, and it's obviously responding to that low end a little bit more, and we're not really getting any compression on the sort of mids and the tops. So just quite a nice feature of FabFilter Pro C compressor. A lot of other compressors have this sidechain filtering, but the way it's set up on here is really easy to use, quite easy to understand. So kind of listen to this with the loop. And it's just that kind of bus compression is just helping the sounds gel together a little bit more, just making it sound like, you know, it's one kind of loop rather than individual sounds that are just randomly jumping out all over the place. So that's the loop kind of put together and processed, really. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you found it useful. Any questions, please get in touch. And of course, if you're not checking it out already, go to FM8tutorials.com and you can find out loads more info about the synthesizer and various tutorials and discussions in the forum just about the synth and various sounds you can put together using that synth. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you again soon. Cheers, bye.